For the convenience of our study, I have divided it into three parts. Part 1 and 2, we are going to study the intestinal nematodes, and part 3 will be on tissue nematodes. Okay. So basically, these organisms, they are quite different from that we have studied in the previous two lectures on cystodes and trematodes. Those were the flat worms, and these are the cylindrical worms. Now, starting with the initial introductory part of nematodes, which is important for all the three parts which we are going to study successively. We'll be studying the general characters of nematodes, intestinal nematode as well as tissue nematode. So the first part would be slightly lengthy because it has some introductory part which is important to understand the different phases of the nematode. It is important to understand the different terminologies used in the morphology of nematodes, different terminologies which are with respect to the life cycle of this parasite. In that way, there are introductory some important definitions which we are supposed to understand, some terminologies which we are supposed to understand while understanding the nematodes. Okay, so starting with some of the important general characters of nematodes. The intestinal nematode or tissue nematode. According to the previous classification, we have seen that they are cylindrical worms. The body is unsegmented, elongated, and cylindrical in morphology. They are commonly called as filiform or filamentous worms. Fili means filamentous. And both the ends of this worm, cylindrical worm, they are usually pointed, rounded or pointed. Now the size, this size is with respect to all the different nematodes, intestinal as well as tissue nematodes. It measures from 5 millimeter, the smallest being Trichinella spiralis, that is we are going to study today, Trichinella spiralis, to the longest up to 1 meter in length, Dracunculus medinensis, which is a tissue nematode. You will be studying in the third part of nematodes. Okay, so the range of size varies between 5 millimeters to up to 1 meter in size. The body is covered with a tough cuticula. The whole body of the parasite has a covering which is called as cuticula. You will be observing the diagram of that cuticula in the next slide. The body cavity is present. These are cylindrical worms. It has a body cavity in which all the different systems, they are embedded. The reproductive system, the excretory system, the nervous system, all these systems, they are embedded or they are floating inside the cavity of the body. So body cavity is present. Excretory and nervous system, they are rudimentary. Alimentary canal, most importantly, alimentary canal is complete with the mouth and the anus, as we have discussed previously during the comparison between the other two classes. Then, these are dioecious parasites. The sexes, they are separate. The male and the female parasite, they are separate. Male, usually it is smaller than the female. The posterior end is curved or coiled ventrally. Now today we are going to study some of the important ones. You can observe the male which is much more smaller than the female, as well as the posterior end which is coiled ventrally. The female, comparatively, it is longer than the male. And this female, in nematode, either they liberate the eggs after fertilization. Those female that liberate eggs, they are called as oviparous parasites or oviparous nematode. Whereas some of the parasite, they liberate the larvae after fertilization and not the egg. such a female which liberates larvae after fertilization, it is called as viviparous parasite or viviparous nematode. Whereas there are some exceptional nematodes which produce eggs in the uterus, but during their laying of eggs, immediately the larvae is hatched out. So here eggs are produced, but during laying of the eggs, the larvae hatch out, and such a parasite is called as ovoviviparous parasite or ovoviviparous nematode. Okay, so these are some of the important descriptional points regarding the laying of eggs or larvae by the female parasite. Oviparous, viviparous, and ovoviviparous. Now, here actually we are supposed to this slide I have projected to understand the internal details specifically with respect to the sexual reproduction of male and female. As I have told you, they are dioecious parasite. Male is shorter than the female. The shorter one in this figure is the male and the longer one is the female. But specifically, we will focus our attention to the sexual reproductive systems in the female parasite. Now, in the female, inside the cylindrical body, the parasite has the ovary, which is in the form of a convoluted tubular structure. It may be single or it may be double. If it is double, the whole tubular structure is folded to the anterior side as well as the posterior side. One is folded onto the anterior side, one on the posterior side. So the ovary where the ovum is produced, and that ovary which opens into the mid-ventral portion of the body, which is called as the vulva or vagina. If there are two tubular structures, these open into the mid-ventral as a common passage, which is the vagina of the female worm. Now, in the male, the testis or the reproductive system can be divided as testis, seminal vesicle, and a long tubular vas deferens, which opens to the posterior end into the cloaca in the form of ejaculatory duct. Now, the cloaca actually is the opening for the intestine. Here in the male, the ejaculatory duct opens into the cloaca, which is the common opening for the alimentary canal. Now, at the same time, observe for the alimentary canal of these two parasites. As I've told you, it has the mouth as well as the anus. The mouth, which is situated at the anterior end in the form of a tubular structure. But in case of some other parasite, there are certain special structures which we are going to see in detail with the respective parasite. Now, this mouth runs through the through the pharynx, esophagus, and ultimately bifurcates into the intestine. These intestine, they run throughout the body up to the posterior end, and in male it opens into the cloaca, which is the common opening for the ejaculatory duct, the male sexual reproductive organ. So here cloaca is meant for a common passage for ejaculatory duct as well as the alimentary canal. Whereas in the female, this intestine ends into the ventral surface in the form of a slit, which is called as the anal pore or anal slit. This anal slit, which is in the form of a slit, it is supported by muscular dilators, so that during excretion, these anal dilators or muscles, they may expand the transverse anus and the products or the end products, they are excreted out. Whereas in case of male parasites, the cloaca opens into the ventral surface. Okay. Now, apart from this particular structure, especially in the male, there are certain copulatory accessory organs which are called as spicules. There are two spicules which are spine-like structure, and these spine-like structure help the male parasite to mate with the female. Okay, so this spicule is meant for copulation of the male with the female parasite, where in the female parasite the vulva is in the anterior half of the body in the form of vagina. Okay. Now, there is some disturbance in the PowerPoint, I think. I would just disconnect and then see whether I can connect it with the desktop application. Okay, I've got back. Are you able to visualize the PowerPoint, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So now here we are going to study some of the important terms which are used in the description of the nematode parasites, so that it will be easy for you to understand each and every aspect, especially with respect to the morphology of the worms. So here, according to the term, I have given the figures at the lower side. First is the cuticula, which is an outer hyaline membrane, a non-cellular layer, which is tough in nature. In the lower left side, a tough layer is seen on the surface of the parasite, which is called as cuticula. Second is cervical alley. This is a wing-like expansion of the cuticula near the mouth in some of the parasite, not all. The third important term is cervical papillae. In the second figure, you can see that the cuticula is dilated near the esophagus, which is a bulb-like structure. This is called as cervical papillae, protuberance of the cuticula near the esophagus. The fourth term is buccal capsule. But this buccal capsule is more well developed in some parasite, but not all. Ankylostoma and Necator americanus. These are the two nematode members in which the buccal capsule is well developed. And what is the buccal capsule? When the oral aperture leads to a mouth cavity, it may contain teeth or cutting plates. So this buccal capsule is very important for that parasite during feeding. Okay. Then The cloaca, we have studied the cloaca in the last slide. It is a common passage in male parasite where the rectum and the genital duct opens, the ejaculatory duct. The next is about the larvae. The first larval form is filariform larvae. Understand the word filariform larvae. Means it is a filamentous larvae. Now this larvae has a long esophagus. The first diagram at the left side has a long esophagus which is not dilated at the posterior end. The esophagus is very long, but it is not dilated in the form of a bulb. Such filamentous form, which is very narrow and long, it is called as the filariform larvae. The second term for the larvae is rhabdiform larvae. Now this rhabdiform larvae is the larval form which is released from the embryonated egg. Remember, rhabdiform is the larva which is released from the embryonated egg after maturation, and this is comparatively very short than the filariform larva, but it is stout, and the esophagus is short, may have one or two bulb-like structures at the posterior end before the intestine starts. So this rhabdiform larvae, which has a short esophagus and a bulb-like structure, is called the rhabdiform larvae. Now, as this is the larval form which is hatched out from the egg, it is not infectious to any host unless it gets converted into the filariform larvae. And this conversion of rhabdiform larvae to filariform larvae occurs in the soil. Okay, that is very important for you to understand the infective form for human being. It is the filariform larvae and never the rhabdiform larvae. Okay, then gubernaculum. Gubernaculum is a term which is just an elevation of the dorsal wall of the cloaca. Where the cloaca is present, the dorsal wall is slightly elevated. This is because the spiny spicules are present in that particular area. And these spiny spicules, they are protrusible spiny structures or copulatory organs. They can retract inside or they can protrude outside. During copulation, these spicules, they protrude out to hold the female parasite tightly. And that's why the gubernaculum, which also is supported with muscular rays that protrude the spicules outside during copulation. So this gubernaculum is just an elevation of the dorsal wall of the cloaca which guides the spicule during copulation. And what are the spicules? They are accessory copulatory organs, they are rod-like and they are protrusive. Okay. Now, the last important term which you are supposed to understand is the copulatory bursa. Copulatory bursa is present only in some of the male parasites, not all. Now, this is an umbrella-like expansion of the cuticula, the outer layer, surrounding the cloaca of the male parasite of only some of the species, used to hold the female work during copulation. Now, during copulation, the male parasite which has the copulatory bursa, it will hold tightly to the female parasite near the vulvar waist and copulation takes place. Now, this copulatory bursa is also supported with muscular structures or muscular rays. And these muscular rays help the male parasite to hold tightly with the female during copulation. And that is called as the copulatory bursa, which is present in the male parasites. Okay. Now, after this, we'll start with our topic today. If you have understood all these definitions properly, you will be able to observe, or you will be able to understand each and every aspect of the description of the parasite, the morphological characters, as well as the life cycle with respect to the larval forms. Okay. Now, this classification at this stage, I have simplified it for the understanding of our topic on intestinal nematode. Basically, broadly, the nematodes, they have been classified as intestinal nematodes and somatic or tissue nematodes. Intestinal nematodes, we have again classified them into two parts for our convenience. Now, in this intestinal nematode, we have classified the worms according to the site of localization of this parasite. At the same time, somatic or tissue nematodes, they have also been classified on the basis of their site of localization. Okay. Now, intestinal nematode, those that reside in the small intestine, they are Ascaris lumbricoides, Ankylostoma duodenale, Necator americanus, Strongyloides stercoralis. These are the major human pathogens which reside in the small intestine. Now, the fifth worm here which I am describing is Trichinella spiralis. Actually, this is the parasite which resides in the intestine, the adult worms. But this is a parasite which forms a bridge between intestinal nematode and tissue nematode, because this has an intestinal phase as well as a tissue phase. And in this lecture, we are going to study at the end Trichinella spiralis, one of the members. Okay. Now, other parasites which reside in the intestine according to the site of localization, those that localize in the cecum and vermiform appendix. They are Enterobius vermicularis. Okay. Now, these Enterobius vermicularis and Trichuris trichura, these are the two worms that reside in the cecum and the vermiform appendix. Okay. So, whereas the tissue nematode, which we are going to study in the last part of this nematodes, we will be describing it again when you are studying that in the third part of nematodes. At present, focus your attention only to the intestinal nematode, which we have divided into two parts, part 1 and 2. Now, in part 1, we are going to study the intestinal nematodes that reside in the small intestine, that is Ascaris lumbricoides and Trichinella spiralis. Whereas one of the worms that reside in the cecum and vermiform appendix, that is Trichuris trichura. These are the three worms which we are going to study today. And in the next second part, you will be studying Ankylostoma duodenale, Necator americanus, Strongyloides stercoralis, and Enterobius vermicularis. Now, this classification we have done only for the convenience of our study, because in part 1, the parasites which we are going to study, they produce bile-stained eggs. Bile-stained eggs, the parasite where the eggs or the outer layer of the egg is brown in color. Whereas rest of the parasite which we are going to study in the second part, they are non-bile stained egg producing parasites. All of them, they are intestinal nematodes. Just for our convenience, we have classified this on the bile stain property of the eggs. Okay, so Ascaris lumbricoides, Trichinella spiralis, and Trichuris trichura. These are the three worms we are going to study today. Okay. Now, starting with the first important worm, Ascaris lumbricoides, which is commonly called as the roundworm. Now, before starting this topic, I would like to focus your attention towards the common names of the helminthic worms. Why? Because it will be easy for you to understand to which class of the parasite does it belong to. Now, if you can recollect cystodes, their names are being given according to the host in which they infect. For example, in cystode, they are commonly called as tapeworms. If they infect the pigs, they are called as pork tapeworm. If they infect the cattle, they are called as beef tapeworm, in that way. So depending upon the host in which the adult worm infection is present or the larval worm infection is present, they were named accordingly, the cystodes. But if you see the trematodes, they were named according to the site of localization. For example, in trematode, you have studied Fasciola hepatica, which the site of localization is the liver. They are called as liver. Cystosoma hematobium, Cystosoma japonicum, Cystosoma mansoni, they reside in the blood vessels. So they were called as blood flows. Paragonimus westermani, which resides in the lung. So it was called as lung flow. So trematodes, they are classified on the basis of site of localization of the adult worms. Now here in case of nematodes, they are according to the shape and morphology of the adult worms. The common names are given according to the morphology of the adult worms. Understand this. Now here in this case, Ascaris lumbricoides, which is the most important parasite, we are going to study in intestinal nematode, that is commonly called as common roundworm. Okay. Now, some important features of the morphology of the adult worms. According to their site of localization, they reside in the lumen of the small intestine, usually the jejunum of human being. Most important thing about nematode parasite, particularly with respect to intestinal nematodes. For the completion of life cycle, only one host is required. No second host is present in the life cycle of these parasites. So here the life cycle becomes much more easier to understand because there is no confusion about the host. Whichever host it is the definitive host. But both the life cycle or both the stages in the life cycle, the adult worm as well as the larval form, they are present in the same parasite, same host. Okay. So no confusion with the host. Single host is required for the completion of the life cycle. But for the existence of that particular parasite in the nature, it has to change the host. So alternative host for existence may be there, or usually it is there. But in case of infection in human being, definitely when it infects the human being, the whole life cycle completes in the same host. Okay. Now, the adult worm, normally, as I told you, they are present in the small intestine, in the lumen, in the jejunum of the human being. The adult worms, they appear light brown or pink in color when they are extracted from the human intestine. Later on, they may become whitish or creamy white in color. The anterior end is usually thinner. In the diagram, you can see the anterior portion of the male and the female parasite. And this anterior end, which comprises the mouth, this mouth is surrounded by finely toothed lips. There are 3 lips, one on the dorsal surface and 2 on the ventral surface. So finely toothed lips are present around the mouth of both male and the female parasite. Morphology of the male, it measures of about 15 to 25 centimeters in length by 3 to 4 millimeter in breadth. And see the male parasite, the tail end is curved ventrally. You can also observe at the ventral end the appearance of two spicules, which are the accessory copulatory organ of the male parasite. A cylindrical worm, anterior end is slightly narrow, whereas the posterior end is slightly broader, and the male parasite posterior end is coiled ventrally. Such posterior end, it is not coiled in the female parasite. The anterior end also contains 3 lips, 1 dorsal, 2 ventral lips, and in the anterior 1/3 of the body, there is a notch-like structure which is called as the vulvar waist, where the vulva is present or the vagina opens of the female. Now, the male parasite, with the help of the spicules, attaches to this vulvar waist during copulation. Okay, so this vulvar waist is meant for copulation of the female with the male parasite, and the spicules, they are important for attachment of the male parasite to the female worm at the vulvar waist. Size of the female, it is longer and stouter than the male, 25 to 40 centimeters in length by 5 millimeter. The posterior end, it is conical and straight. Then, the adult male, according to the size, 15 to 25 centimeters by 3 to 4 millimeters, tail end is curved ventrally. Now, the genital pore opens into the cloaca, as we have described previously in general introduction. Here, the ejaculatory duct of the genital system, male genital system, opens into the cloaca, from which 2 copulatory spicules protrude. Anus open with the ejaculatory duct in the cloaca. Whereas the female, it is longer and stouter than the male, 25 to 40 centimeters by 5 millimeter in size. Posterior end is conical and straight. The anus is subterminal and opens ventrally. And the vulvar waist, it is in the middle third of the body on the mid-ventral aspect. And the last important character of the female, it may liberate up to 2 lakh eggs daily. You can just assume one single female worm that can liberate 2 lakh eggs in the intestine, in the small intestine. Okay. Now this female, which liberates such a large amount of eggs, is a very important characteristic feature of Ascaris. The second important characteristic feature of Ascaris female is some of the females, they are parthenogenetic. Understand the meaning of parthenogenetic. A female that can produce eggs without mating with a male is called as parthenogenetic. And in that case, if the female is a parthenogenetic female, it can liberate unfertilized eggs. Understand very properly. A female that can fertilize with the male may give rise to fertilized eggs. But in Ascaris, there are some females which can produce eggs without mating with a male. Such female is called as parthenogenetic female, and this parthenogenetic female, they may produce unfertilized eggs. Okay. Now we are going to see in the next slide the difference between the types of eggs, fertilized egg and unfertilized egg. Okay. Now here in 2 columns, I have shown the eggs. First is fertilized egg, second is unfertilized egg. Now the description of these eggs is very important for you to understand, because you are supposed to do the exercise of stool examination during your practical examination. And in that, during examination, if you are able to observe the eggs of Ascaris, whether fertilized or unfertilized, you are supposed to describe those eggs in the answer sheet. And that's why I have projected the details which are expected from you during the description of Ascaris egg, if you find it in the stool examination during your examination, final exam. Okay, so fertilized egg, comparatively we'll go along with unfertilized egg. Fertilized eggs, they are round or oval. You can see the description and match the description on the figures below. They are round or oval, whereas unfertilized eggs, they are elongated, elliptical, and narrower as compared to the fertilized eggs. Size 60 to 75 micron by 40 to 50 micron in size. Whereas unfertilized egg, they are much more elliptical, 80 micron by 55 micron in size. Okay, then both of these, they are bile stained eggs, brown in color. Fertilized eggs, they may be corticated or decorticated. Understand the word corticated. Cortication is the outermost layer of the egg, which is an albuminous coat which is thrown into regular ridges and furrows. It is a laminated layer, a tough outer layer which is thrown into folds. And such a laminated layer which is thrown into folds, it is called as the cortication. When this is present, the egg is called as corticated egg. When this outer layer is lost, the egg appears smooth on its surface because of the loss of cortication. Such an egg is called as decorticated egg. Whereas internal contents, they are one and the same. Now, contains a large this contains a large conspicuous unsegmented ovum with a clear crescentic space. If you observe the ovum inside the fertilized egg, both corticated and decorticated, there is a crescentic space at the two poles inside the eggshell. This crescentic space is actually a vacuum, and this is clear cut seen in the fertilized egg because the ovum is much compact. Okay, now such a compact ovum with crescentic space is the important characteristic feature of fertilized egg. On the other hand, this crescentic space is absent in the unfertilized egg because it contains a small atrophied ovum with a mass of disorganized, highly refractile granules of varying sizes which are distributed throughout the inner space. So inside there is just a small ovum which is atrophied, and the whole egg is filled with small disorganized granular masses, and there is no space in between. And that's why this egg becomes much more heavier as compared to the fertilized egg, which has a crescentic space. So if these two eggs are dropped into saturated salt solution, having crescentic space, the fertilized eggs, they float on the saturated salt solution. Whereas in the unfertilized egg, being heavier, it sinks at the bottom of the saturated salt solution. Okay, so that is the important feature or important differential characters of fertilized and unfertilized eggs of Ascaris. Both of them, they may be corticated or decorticated. Usually, the unfertilized eggs, they are never decorticated because the outer layer remains as such. So these are the important differential characters of the fertilized and unfertilized egg of Ascaris. Okay, now To study the life cycle, as I have told you, man is the only host of this parasite. The whole life cycle takes place in human being, adult form as well as the larval form. They are present in the human. It is necessary to understand which is the infective form. As the adult worm, as I have told you, they can liberate, the adult female can liberate up to 2 lakh eggs per day. Initially, when the eggs are liberated from the female, which appear in the feces of the man, the ovum is still intact. It has not undergone development. So this egg, which is liberated in the feces of human, it is still immature as with respect to the internal content of the internal ovum. This ovum has to undergo development in the soil to get converted into a larval form. So this development is very, very essential. Then only the egg becomes infective to man. And such an egg where the inner ovum has been developed into a larval form is called as an embryonated egg. Such embryonated eggs with the larvae, they are the infective form for human being. Okay. Now these infective forms which are present in the soil or water after consumption of drinking of contaminated water or consumption of contaminated vegetables, the ripe egg containing the larvae inside is taken up during ingestion. So the mode of entry is by the ingestion, oral route. Infective form is the embryonated egg in which the larval form has been developed. And when such an egg is ingested, the outer shell of the egg is destroyed by digestive enzymes, and the larvae is liberated in the duodenum. Okay. Now this larvae, which is released in the duodenum, it penetrates the intestinal wall and then it is carried through the blood circulation to different internal organs. That we are going to study in the life cycle in detail. Just remember, this larval form, which is liberated in the duodenum where there is a favorable environment for the growth of this parasite, it immediately does not get converted into the adult. Remember, this is a very, very important point. Because the larva has to undergo much more development still. And unless it penetrates through the intestinal wall into the blood circulation, carried to the liver, then to the heart, then to the lungs, and then into the systemic circulation, it has to undergo development during this traveling, during this migration. And that's why immediately it will not give rise to the adult worms. Okay? So this larvae migrates through the blood circulation, may also reach the lungs, where it may even settle and may give rise to the developmental form. So second site of localization may be the lungs. And then it is swallowed back into the intestine. Till then it undergoes developmental stages, undergoes moltings, get modified or get converted into adult forms, and as it reaches the intestine, it gets converted into the adult worm, male and the female, and maturation occurs, copulation occurs, and then the eggs are liberated. That cycle we are going to study in the next slide. At this stage, just remember, embryonated egg is the larval with the larval form is the infective form for human being. Mode of infection is by ingestion of the embryonated egg with the larvae. Rarely, as the parasite, they may also develop in the soil. It may expel out in the dust particles and sometimes may be inhaled. In that case, respiratory infection may occur where the egg hatches out the larvae in the mucosal surface and the larval form is released. Okay, but it is a very rare condition. Inhalation, the method of inhalation for infection. Mostly it is by ingestion of the embryonated egg containing the larvae. Now, which is the larvae here? It is the first larval form inside the embryonated egg. It is the Rhabdiiform larva, having a short esophagus which may be dilated at the posterior end, and it is much more stouter as compared to the filariform larva. Now, in the life cycle of this parasite, filariform larva is not developed. Only the Rhabdiiform larva is present in the life cycle. Okay. Then, the site of localization of this parasite is the small intestine. Now we are going to study the life cycle. As I told you, man is the only host. Patients who are suffering from ascariasis, infection with ascaris, the adult worms are present in the intestine, mate together, fertilized eggs are liberated. These fertilized eggs, they are thrown out from the feces, may contaminate the food articles as well as the water resources. Man gets infection by consumption of water or food articles. Now, before getting infected, the egg has to undergo development, as I told. The first developmental phase is seen inside the egg itself, which is called as first molting, during which the ovum is ready to get converted into the larval form. This is called as the first molting. It gets compact and ready for development. So first molting of the parasite takes place inside the eggshell. Then, when it is released outside, it undergoes development, gets converted into the larval form. At this stage, it is the initial larval phase of the parasite, which is called as the Rhabdiiform larva. When such an egg is ingested, the outer eggshell is disrupted in the duodenum. The larval form, Rhabdiiform larvae, is released, and the Rhabdiiform larvae, with the help of the apical complex, penetrates the intestinal wall, enters the mucosa, and then reaches the portal circulation. Now, through the portal circulation, this larva is carried to the liver. Now, during this process, this tiny larvae is slowly developing. From the liver, it is carried to the right side of the heart. Then, through the pulmonary capillaries, it reaches the lungs. Now, during this migration, this larva is feeding and growing. And as it reaches the lungs, which is said to be the site of localization, here it comes out through the capillaries of the pulmonary capillaries and reaches the alveoli. It reaches the alveolar space where it settles, which is said to be the first site of localization of this parasite. So in the lungs, they settle and slowly start developing. And as they erode the pulmonary capillaries, hemoptysis may be seen in such cases. Now, the larval form here still undergoes much more development and undergoes molting twice. That is, developmental stages. Two developmental stages occur in the lungs, or two moltings occur in the lungs. Now, after two moltings in the lungs, this larval form enters the bronchi, then comes into the trachea, goes up to the larynx and pharynx, and later on it is re-swallowed from the esophagus. Now, when this traveling of the parasite from the lungs through the bronchi, trachea to the larynx, pharynx, and then again into the epiglottis, it is again swallowed and comes into the small intestine, the duodenum. Now, till then, it has completely been developed, and now it can get matured into sexual forms, male and the female. Now, after getting sexual maturation over here, the fourth molting takes place and they mate together, the male and the female. After mating, the female produces eggs in the uterus. 2 lakh eggs can be liberated by a female per day. And such eggs, they are thrown out in the intestine by the female, which are initially immature. When they come out along with the feces, they undergo maturation in the soil to get converted into an embryonated form, and again it is infected to other host. So this is how the life cycle takes place. This is the usual cycle where the Ascaris larvae immediately does not get converted into the adult one. It has to travel through the different routes, through the blood vessel to the liver, to the heart, then into the lungs, get matured, get molted in the lungs twice, and then it is re-swallowed again into the intestine. Till then, during this migration, the parasite feeds and undergoes molting and getting converted into a developed mature form. And as it again reaches the small intestine, it gets completely matured. Fourth molting takes place. They mate together and the eggs are liberated. This is the usual life cycle of this parasite. But there are certain unusual conditions when the larvae is migrating through the blood vessels. It may be carried to any internal organ. Usually this happens only when the case is a very severe case, a immunocompromised state in the host. In that condition, this larvae may sometimes go to any distinct organ, even the kidneys, the brain, the heart muscles. And when these parasite or the larvae reaches these particular organs, this may lead to ectopic ascariasis. Okay, so this is of the usual life cycle of this parasite, which are the different sites where it undergo maturation. And after complete maturation in different sites, how the adult worms, they liberate the eggs. Now here, only one host is required, where adult worm is also present in the intestine and the larval worm is also present, which is migrating through the blood vessels to different internal organs. Sites of localization also you have understood. First site of localization of most of them is the lungs, whereas the main site of localization is the small intestine. Okay. Then further we'll study the pathogenicity of this worm. There is some disturbance in the slideshow. I'll just see what it is. Okay. Pathogenicity and clinical features of ascariasis. Symptoms due to migrating larvae. First important thing. Migrating larvae, as I've told you, the rabbitiform larvae migrates through the blood vessels to the liver, from the liver to the heart, then to the lungs. If they reach the lung, the site of localization is the lungs, where the capillaries are eroded. In the sputum, the larval form of the parasite may also be observed, or the blood also may be observed due to erosion of the capillaries of the lungs. Lesions in the lungs causes Ascaris pneumonia, which is called as Löffler's syndrome. Symptoms of pneumonia such as fever, cough, and dyspnea may be seen. Hemoptysis which may contain larvae in the sputum, and because the worms, they are growing worms, they also release toxic metabolites that leads to anaphylactic reaction, where we may observe urticarial rashes and eosinophilia. Okay, then larvae localization. larvae passes through the circulation to the brain, spinal cord, heart, and the kidneys, which may lead to ectopic ascariasis. Next is the symptoms due to adult worms. Adult worms, they are present in the small intestine. As they are the adult worms, they feed on the intestinal contents. Specifically, this infection is more commonly seen in children. And in children, if such infection is present, the adult worms which are present in the intestine, they rob the nutrients of the child. Usually the proteins, they are taken up by the adult worms, being much more larger. A large amount of nutrients, they are robbed from the intestine of the host. Protein energy malnutrition in children due to robbing of host protein nutrients. Vitamin A deficiency that may lead to night blindness in the children. Second is toxic action. As you know, these are cylindrical worms. The cylindrical body contains fluid. That fluid is, in case of ascaris, is called as ascaron, the fluid inside the body of the adult worm. But this ascaron is very anaphylactic in its action. If it is released outside the body, it may give rise to anaphylactic reaction. That is very important. So the death of the parasite inside the body of the host may lead to anaphylactic reaction. But even if the death does not occur, the parasite liberates toxic metabolites during its feeding. And these toxic metabolites may lead to anaphylactic reaction. Leads to fever, urticaria, edema of the face, conjunctivitis, and irritation of the upper respiratory tract. This is about the release of toxic substance from the body of the parasite. First was due to deficiency of nutrients which are taken up by the worms, which is called as palliative action. Second is toxic ascaron action. Third is mechanical effect of the worm. Mechanical effect due to the presence of the adult worm. You can see the size of the adult worm, 25 centimeter in length maximum, the male parasite. 40 centimeter in length, the female parasite. Breadth, which is measured in millimeters, 3 to 5 millimeter in breadth. Now, such worms present in the intestine, when they completely get entangled together, the intestinal fails its peristaltic movement, because of which there is overlap of the intestinal wall, which is called as intersusception, and because of which there is abdominal cramps. So intersusception is due to the mechanical effect produced by the worms which are present in the intestine. At the same time, these live parasites, they may burrow their way into the intestinal ulcers which are present in the intestine of the host. Ulcers produced by any other organism. Being a hollow, these parasites may penetrate into the ulcer, giving rise to hemorrhages in the intestine. So this is another important characteristic feature of Ascaris egg, which leads to a particular hemorrhage in the intestine. Then, ectopic ascaris. Third is obstruction of the intestine, a very important feature, because Ascaris worms, hundreds of worms in the child's intestine, if they get entangled together, it forms a bolus, which will obstruct the small intestine. And this obstruction of the intestine is very, very dangerous. In that case, it may even lead to death of the patient. So, intestinal obstruction may also be seen because of the entangled mass of the Ascaris. You are going to see the slides of each of these fatal cases due to intestinal obstruction. Okay. After that, ectopic ascariasis. Ascariasis or manifestation apart from the intestine because of the adult. Now, usually what happens, if there is an extensive infection in the intestine. These worms, which are usually present in the intestine, when the patient is asleep in the night, these crawl up into the small intestine, comes into the duodenum, then into the stomach. From the stomach, it may travel upward or migrate upward into the esophagus and may come out from the mouth or from the nose. Now, this happens when the patient is asleep during night. If the patient is extensively infected, and such crawling of the parasite from the intestine into the stomach, from the esophagus into the nose or into the mouth is called as ectopic ascariasis. Even this may enter into the respiratory tract, because of which there is blockage of the airway passage, and this may lead to suffocation of the patient. In that case, death is a must, because this suffocation is never revealed of, because the patient is asleep. Until the doctor arrives to that patient, the patient is dead due to suffocation. This is called as ectopic ascariasis. Now, this may even be the parasites, they may even come out from the nose or the mouth, or may even enter the respiratory tract. But at the same time, the larval forms or the adult worms, they may even block the biliary passage, or they may infect the pancreas, giving rise to hemorrhagic pancreatitis, or they may block the biliary passage, leading to obstructive jaundice. So these are some of the important features, clinical manifestations seen in extensively infected ascariasis, which is called as ectopic ascariasis. Now here, I'll run through some of the slides. It is the intestine filled with a number of adult worms which are entangled together, completely blocking the intestine. This is the excised piece of intestine of the fatal case of ascariasis, intestinal obstruction. Again, the section of intestine has been extracted. You can see the number of ascaris worms, adult worms, which have been excised. And this is the fatal case where ectopic ascariasis is seen, coming out from the nose and the mouth. For the laboratory diagnosis, stool examination has to be done. Sometimes vomit can be collected. Observe for the typical eggs. The first figure shows the electron microscopic picture of the outer layer of the eggs, which is thrown into folds, which is a mammillated layer called as cortication. The second and third are the corticated fertilized eggs. Observe for the typical crescent shape in the corticated egg. In the fourth figure, it is decorticated fertilized egg. And the fifth picture is molting stage inside the egg, in the fertile egg. You can also see the crescentic space on the sides, where the inner ovum has been divided into two, ultimately giving rise to the rhabdiform larva inside the egg. You can also see the typical ridges and furrows on the outer cortication. And this inner rhabdiform larva has been hashed out in the lower slide. Okay. Now, indirect evidence, observe for the typical appearance, blood examination, eosinophilia. Allergic test can be done for the detection of hypersensitivity to ascaron, the fluid inside the body of the ascaris. Second parasite, Trichuris trichura. Now, this is very, very simple for you to understand, not very difficult as that of ascaris. Again here, the adult worms, they are present in the large intestine, particularly the cecum and the vermiform appendix. Okay. These adult worms, they are commonly called as whip worms. Understand the size first. On the right side, the excised adult male and the female have been shown. Observe for the typical appearance of the male, which is having a coiled tail end or posterior end. and a long thread-like anterior end. Whereas the female, it is comma shaped or slightly curved posterior end, and the anterior end is very long and thin. Now, if you just understand the size of this parasite, the adult male usually measures up about 3 to 4 centimeter in length. Out of this 3 to 4 centimeter, 3 centimeter part is completely thin, very, very thin. Only 1 centimeter portion is the posterior region, which is coiled up. Okay. Whereas the female parasite, which measures about 4 to 5 centimeter, 3/5 of the anterior end is very, very thin, the anterior region. Whereas the 2/5 portion, it is slightly stouter and elongated and curve shape or comma shape. This anterior end, 3/5 of the anterior end, which is very, very thin, it is burrowed into the mucosa of the intestine, into the cecum, usually, of the male and the female. Only 2/5 of the portion remains outside the mucosa in the intestine. That means 75% of the portion of the adult worms, it is burrowed into the mucosa. Only 25% remains outside. And on the basis of that 25%, we can be able to identify whether it is a male or the female parasite. If the posterior end is coiled ventrally, it is male. If it is not coiled, it is the female. So while observing the intestine, you observe only 25% of the worm in the intestine. The rest 75 is burrowed into the intestinal mucosa. And these parasites, they are oviparous parasites. And being oviparous parasite, the sexual reproductive organs, they are, hello? Sorry. The sexual reproductive organs of this parasite, they are present in the posterior half of the body. And during copulation, the male parasite, when it copulates with the female, eggs are produced by the female, and these eggs are liberated in the intestine. Okay, now how are the eggs? These eggs, they have a very typical shape. On the basis of their morphology only you can identify them. It is a double-shelled, barrel-shaped or spindle-shaped with mucus plugs at one or both the ends. You can observe the mucus plugs on both the ends. 50 microns by 25 micron in size. They are bile stained, brown in color, contains a large, conspicuous, unsegmented ovum, the first figure. When they are liberated in an immature form. The ovum is compact. Later on, it undergoes maturation in the soil or water. The inner ovum starts dividing, getting converted into the larval form, and ultimately give rise to the third figure, that is the larval form, which is called as the embryonated form of the egg. Such embryonated egg, it floats in the saturated salt solution, because in this also, even if the larval has been developed, there is a clear space in between the egg shell and the larvae. And that's why such an egg floats under saturated salt solution. It is also bile stained. The outer layer is brown in color. Okay. So, life cycle passes its life cycle in only one host. Man is the only host of this parasite of Trichuris trichura. Infective form is the embryonated egg with a larvae. Mode of infection, same as that of Ascaris, ingestion of embryonated egg with the larvae. Site of localization is the small intestine. Now, in the life cycle, there is no much confusion as that's seen in Ascaris, because here, when the embryonated egg is ingested, the mucus plug of the embryonated egg, it is destroyed by digestive enzymes, and the larvae protrudes out from the mucus plug. Now this larvae, when it comes into the intestine, it gets converted into the adult worm directly. It does not invade the bloodstream, or it does not invade the mucosa. Directly, it gets converted into male and the female parasite. And after mating, the eggs are liberated, which are spindle-shaped, bile-stained, and they are thrown into the feces. That's simple life cycle it is. Now, here you can see the excised intestine showing number of adult worms. Now, such infection in the intestine, usually the site of localization is the cecum and the vermiform appendix. Such parasites present just near to the appendix may invade the appendix, giving rise to acute appendicitis. And often it is related to rectal prolapse. Acute appendicitis, abdominal pain, mucus diarrhea, blood streaks, stool may be seen, and rectal prolapse. Okay. For the laboratory diagnosis, stool is collected. We may even observe the adult worm of the parasite if it is excised from the intestine. It may come along with the feces. So the adult worm occasionally may be seen, or you observe the typical eggs, which are double-shelled, barrel-shaped with mucus plugs, 50 micron to 25 micron in size, bile-stained, which are brown in color, contains unsegmented ovum, and they can float in the saturated salt solution. And lastly, Trichinella spiralis, which is commonly called as whipworm. Trichuris trichura is called as whipworm. Trichinella spiralis is called as trichina worm. Now remember, this worm is a bridge between intestinal nematode and tissue nematode. Why? Because this has an intestinal phase where the adult worms are seen, and a tissue phase where the larval worms are seen. The trichina worm. Understand the size and habitat of this parasite. Habitat: adult worms, they are present in the intestine, usually in the duodenum and the jejunal mucosa. Larval worms, they are seen in the striated muscles, not the smooth muscles, neither the cardiac muscles. They are present in the striated muscles. Morphology: this is the smallest human nematode infecting human being. Male measures of about just 1.4 to 1.6 millimeters. Smallest tapeworm, smallest nematode worm, cylindrical one, by 0.04 millimeters. The spicules and copulatory sheath is not present. Two conical papillae instead are present at the posterior end and not the spicules. When these conical papillae are present, this conical papillae may be responsible for copulation of the male with the female. Female parasite measures of about 3 to 4 millimeter in size by 0.06 millimeters. And these parasites, they are viviparous parasite. They do not produce eggs. They liberate the larval form of the parasite. And the larval form is just called as an embryo. No terminology is used to describe the larvae of this particular parasite, Trichina. And this larval form is infective to man. It measures of about 100 micron by 6 micron in size. So in the lower figures, you are observing the male parasite, the female parasite, and the larvae. Okay, and for human being, the larval form is present, which is present in the striated muscle of the infected host. And how does man get infection? Man gets infection with the consumption of undercooked meat of certain animals which act as the host of this parasite, usually the pigs. In the muscles of the pigs, this larval form undergoes encystation and remains in a dormant form. Now, this larval form present in the striated muscles of the pigs, man gets infected by consumption of undercooked meat of pigs. Now, usually of this parasite, the natural host are the rats and pigs. The natural cycle goes on in between these two animals, from rat to rat, or from rat to pig, or from pig to rat. In that way, man is an accidental host of this parasite, where he gets infected with the larval form which are present in the striated muscles of the pigs. While consuming such raw meat of pigs, man gets infection. Okay. Now, life cycle. The worm passes its life cycle in only one host, pig and rat, or accidental host, man. Infective form is the encysted larvae in the muscles of the infected pig. Mode of infection is by ingestion of encysted larvae in the striated muscles of the pig. Site of localization, even in human being, it is the striated muscles. But when this parasite resides in the striated muscles of human being, it is the dead end of the life cycle of this parasite. Why? Because the flesh of human being is usually never eaten up by any animals. Okay. Very simple life cycle I have shown here. Man consuming undercooked meat of pork. After consuming, the larval form comes into the intestine, burrows its way into the intestinal wall, gets sexually matured, male and female. Male and female, they mate together, and immediately after mating, the male dies immediately. Now the female burrows its way into the mucous membrane, comes into the submucosa where it settles. And in the submucosa, it starts liberating the larval form. Now this female, which is present in the submucosa, can liberate 1000 to 1500 larvae at a time. And these larvae, which measures of about just 100 micron in length by just 6 microns in breadth, it penetrates the peripheral, it penetrates the venues, and through the venues, it is carried to the different internal organs. Now, usually the site of localization of this larvae is the striated muscles. They prefer striated muscles for their settlement. But through the blood, this larvae may be carried out to any internal organ, including the heart, kidneys, brain, and wherever it reaches, this does not get matured into adult worm. Remember, because that environment is not favorable for its maturation into adult. So, wherever it reaches, even if it reaches the heart muscles, here they are either destroyed or this larval form may give rise to degenerative changes in the heart muscles. Even if it goes to the brain, it may lead to epileptic attack, it may lead to meningitis, it may lead to encephalitis. In the heart, it may lead to myocarditis. So, wherever the larval form reaches, usually this happens only in extensively infected cases, not every case. Usually it is a self-limiting disease. So complications may be seen in case of adult worms which are present in the intestine. Usually they do not give rise to any inconvenience because their size is very, very small. Even if there are any clinical manifestations, they are vague abdominal manifestations. So some type of diarrhea, abdominal pain. Most importantly, the clinical features are more prominently seen with respect to the migration of the larval form through the blood to the internal organs, if it is an extensive infection. But if this larval form enters the striated muscles, the infection may be seen as convalescent stage. All the symptoms, they subside, because in this site, which is the convenient site for this parasite for localization, Here it undergoes encystation in the striated muscles. And once it gets encysted, all the symptoms of the infection, they subside. And a phase of convalescence is seen. That is the important feature regarding the life cycle of this parasite, where the adult worms, they do not give rise to much inconvenience in the intestine. Big abdominal manifestation may be seen. The traveling larval form may reach most of the important organs, may give rise to clinical manifestation if it is a severe type of infection, or when it gets into the striated muscles, it gets encysted and the case is undergoing the convalescent stage. Now here, mode of infection is ingestion, stage of intestinal invasion. As I've told you, in the intestine, they do not cause much inconvenience. Stage of larval migration, which is an acute phase. As I've told you, through the blood, it is carried to different internal organs. At the same time, this parasite or the larval form of this parasite may even enter the lymphatics, usually the superficial lymphatics below the skin. The larval form may travel through the lymphatics, and we may sense the crawling of the larval worm below the skin. That is a very important aspect which is to be understood. Irritation and scratching at the site of migration of the parasite of the larval form may be seen in this case. And because this parasite is growing and multiplying, growing and metabolizing in the blood vessels, this may lead to release of toxic metabolites that may lead to anaphylactic reaction. We may also see the edema of the face and the eyelids. And in the striated muscle, the larvae undergoes encystation, and such a muscle of the host, if it is the animal, is infective to other host. The infection is called as trichuriasis. For the laboratory diagnosis, stool examination can be done. We can observe the adult worms because they are dead immediately after fertilization. Female worm, it remains burrowed into the mucous membrane, so it may not be observed at times. Blood examination, observe for the larval worms in the blood circulation. Muscle biopsy, observe for the encysted larval form. Serological test can be done. Complement fixation, not neutralization test can be done. X-ray examination of the affected part can be done for detecting the encysted larvae. And skin test, Brackmann's intradermal skin test can be done for the detection of type 1 hypersensitivity to the substances of the Trichina worm. For the treatment, praziquantel is the drug, albendazole, mebendazole, diethyl carbamazine, then parental pamonate, metronidazole, insecticides, pyrethrin, and permethrin. These are some of the important anti-helminthic drugs which can be used for the treatment of these nematodes. So that's all for today's topic on intestinal nematode part 1, the bile-stained eggs, Ascaris, then Trichuris trichura and Trichinella spiralis. It is important for you to understand the morphology of the eggs, because either of these eggs may be seen in the stool examination during your final examination. So you are necessary to describe the details of the eggs, specifically with respect to the fertilized and unfertilized eggs of Ascaris. Okay. So here we finish up with our today's topic on intestinal nematodes part 1, bile-stained egg parasites or bile-stained egg nematodes. In the next lecture, you will be having non-bile-stained eggs producing parasites, that is Ankylostoma, Necator americanus, Enterobius vermicularis, and Strongyloides stercoralis. So that's all for today.